Okay. There we go. Back again, everybody, with a fun one here. This is my rendition of Toad from the X-Men uh, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and he's kind of a hybrid version of the character. I like to do my own take on it, of course, but this one particularly looks um, a little different than what we know of him. And I just wanted to bring something a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new, and make him look kind of like I don't know. a, a friend of mine offline said that it looked like a Johnny Depp and the Joker had a love child, and that kind of made me laugh a little bit about it. But yeah, I think that's where we're going with it. It's a really cool rendition. I'm actually very pleased with it. I gave him the funky haircut. Not gonna be really organized with it at all. Just gonna kind of throw it out there. It's got a little bit of a almost like a Mark Silvestri kind of spiky style thing going on, but just a little bit of a hint there. Not too much because I don't like to clone anybody else's style. But I mean, it is still definitely an original from me, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm digging it. It came out really well. And since I've been doing these every day, it's making my style grow out a little faster than what I expected. It's nice to see some of these later cards come up and just pop off and look really cool and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bragging or anything. I just think it looks neat. You know how it is as an artist, which many of you are. Um, when it starts to pop and starts to evolve, you get in that zone where it just takes off for a little while, and that's what my style is doing, and I'm really, really pleased with it. My page work is coming off 10 times faster, and I'm really enjoying it just because of this card series. So, um, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and keeping this thing going because it definitely has popped up to where uh, my style has taken a leap forward, and I'm really digging the results. That's not what I did this for originally, but it's a side effect type of a thing, and I'm just having a blast with it because I really dig doing these just as much as you guys like seeing them, and I appreciate all the support and stuff that I keep getting off, um, off of here and off camera and whatnot, and it's just a phenomenal growth all the way around. So I got asked right before I came on what happened to the websites and stuff because the Comic Kickstarter podcast is up and all that. And if you notice it's down right now, it's because I'm in transition to a support backup because the coastline got hit pretty hard with a storm and it knocked out our server bunker. It actually flooded it. It didn't ruin our machinery. It just we had to shut it down and move over to the backups, and everything's being relayed. And we were in renovation processing with the sites when they all went down for connecting them up with the new server built. So for the next probably, I don't know, 18 to 24 hours, they'll probably be down a little bit here and there, and they'll pop back up pretty quick. But yeah, if you see it, I haven't, like disappeared or anything weird like that. It's just technical issues, and I just wanted to give everybody a heads up if you're expecting that. That's what's going on. So don't freak out. I've been getting asked about it since it happened this morning, and there's just a lot going on behind the scenes to fix it. and we are working on it really, really, really fast. Uh, my team is doing a real, real good job. They got a lot of the files converted over, and we're just waiting to get the final touches on everything and get it back up and running. And it's going to go ahead and allow for me to open up the revamp for my primary site, which is bradlinder.com, which is going to be phenomenally fun. I've worked hard on that site, and it's going to be awesome to finally have it out there to where you guys can see it. And yeah, that's going to be an experience within itself. I assure you, that site is going to be great. So I'm knocking out. I wanted him to stick to something and just not be there, just not stuck just in air. So I wanted to put in a background here, and I'm just putting in a nice little set of bricks from this wall here. So we have that, and just about got those done. There we go. That looks about right. Okay. Not bad for freehand. I'm going to cut in this shoulder here. And a little bit of this pectoral muscle right there. And no nurples. I got asked about that again offline. I swear I think that's going to become a tagline for me, and I hope it doesn't stick. But that seems to be the big deal right now. I cut into that lily pad style, jester style glove ribbing here, and I didn't realize I cut right across it when I was talking. Pay attention, man. But yeah. Got his knuckles right there. Now he's a tiny guy. Everybody likes to draw him in different ways. Some people bulk him up. Some people make him really heavy. Some people even make him overweight and aggressively overweight in some cases. And I don't think that this character fits that profile. Because back in the 90s, a few people did it. Jim Lee and specifically Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, when they were working on X-Force and the X-Men books and crossed over all the time, they had a huge thing where they would always put him as a short, stubby, little fat guy. And Toad was never fat. He was always... they tried to make him more like an actual Toad physically. And he was always a little gangly guy. And that was something I was just always frustrated about, because they made that adaptation to him and it stuck for a little while. I don't prefer to have him that way. I like him more in this leaner, sleeker rendition, kind of like think of him kind of like a tree frog rather than a typical, Toad like you'd find. This is the rendition that makes him a little more creepy, and I find it a lot more enticing to watch or read the character when he's like this. And I don't like him to go Morlock style where he turns green and goes underground and gets strange like that. I don't really dig that rendition either. Especially the green one from the almost a biker type of look from the X-Men Evolution series. I didn't dig that incarnation either. I know a lot of people that didn't because of the fact it's just not, it's too modernized to where you lose the contrast of the character, and you make him just a thug kid, and then there's nothing left but attitude at that point. So you don't want to do that, because when people do that, then they end up cutting out the um, the heart of the character more than anything else, and that's no good. So when you take on your own rendition, make sure that you keep the original contrast of the character involved. Yeah, I totally agree, man. I was reading comments from Matt, um, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. He said that he liked the version that I'm doing because of the fact it gives him that contrast and makes him look simple, and traditional, but yet just enough to be, really testy as far as the homicidal side. And I totally agree with that, and that's the look I was going for. So if he portrays that, then we're spot on with this one, because that's exactly what I was going for. And like I said, that whole Johnny Depp Joker line, that actually says a lot more about this character than I would like to admit. But yeah, because that's the way he's leaning. He is a vicious guy, and everybody thinks he's useless, but he's very acrobatic and very agile. And he didn't beat Spider-Man, but I've seen team ups where he would thump characters like that. He got Nightcrawler tied up pretty good a couple of times. Um, he even jumped on Colossus and took him down. He didn't beat him up, but he took him down, and that was a great fight scene. Colossus finally grabbed him, and pulled a wrestling move and threw him over over the back of his shoulders and whatnot, and threw him forward and all that mess. And you know how those scenes typically go. But I found it very fascinating that he got to see that kind of leverage, because normally it's the high end, you know, characters like the Blob from yesterday, or Pyro burning someone, or something like that, and it really, Avalanche coming in and shocking somebody, or something along that line. He doesn't get a lot of recommendations or referrals or use by a lot of comic creators because of that. It's just an undertone thing where when somebody says, hey, recommend me a villain, Toad's not the first one to come to mind. If he is, it's more or less not to use rather than to utilize him, which I think that's a waste, because this character is, like I said, he is just phenomenal. And that's part of why I like doing this series, is because of the fact that I get to draw characters that you wouldn't see in normal situations in the comic books. I get to draw them in a little bit different visual medium, to where we get to see them in a different way, and they get a little more use out of them this way. If you guys go to the cons and stuff and you get to check out what's going on, be sure to go in and talk to the editors and talk to the writers and stuff, and mention to them this kind of stuff, and say, hey, you need to utilize these characters. That way they tend to focus on that and move forward with it, rather than leaving us hanging with a bunch of characters that get rehashed over and over and over to death. And I'm going to cut in a little piece of trim right there. Now, where I've got him stuck is basically on a brick wall, and like I said, in the city kind of thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to detail out those bricks here in a sec and move on to that. But I've got him in the traditional golden mustard colored unitard that I knew him best for when I was growing up and saw him come out, in the comics. These used to be brown or green, or even purple sometimes, depending on the colorist and what they had at the time. And then this suit was always an orange or gold or mustard color. Always, always. And I don't like to make him look like Quasimodo either. A lot of people like to make him really gruesome looking, or like almost like a blob knockoff in the face with a really stunted nose. I don't like to do that because um, what ends up happening is it washes him out and it makes him look mindless, and he's not. He's actually a very, very vicious character and very smart in his own right. But the reason that people portray him badly is because he was abused and he didn't learn how to fight until later. And Magneto gave him the confidence to do that, and that's why he picked him up and brought him into the Brotherhood, because he looked for those victims, because he was a victim himself. You know, Eric Lyncher was definitely a victim himself, as being part of the Holocaust or whatever, rendition you believe at the time. I didn't think that he was part of that in the original run, but you never know. He was definitely an abused mutant and a force to be reckoned with. And he's always picked on people like that for gaining in. Fred Dukes was picked on for his weight. Then you had Pyro, who was bullied because he was an outcast. He was rejected by his parents, and he was an outcast into the world and lived on the street for a little bit. I think part of that story goes into his immigration from Australia as well, because he was originally from that area and immigrated to America, and I think that was part of the problem. But I don't remember how he got here. I just remember he was here. Like I said, when I drew him the other day, it was one of those things where I don't really know the backstory on him as much as I'd like to. I think that character has a lot more meat to the character origin than lets on. They went into a deep look into him when he was back in the X-Men, and got crossed over into, what was it, Daredevil, where the legacy virus was running around poisoning everybody, and he lost control of his mutant abilities. So you just have to think about where that stuff's coming from and check it out and check out those stories and figure out what you like to do. And the way the one cool thing about the Marvel Now universe that we don't get a lot of is, I'll tell you this: if you want to get into the comics and you want to get into the mainstream, Marvel DC Image belt, pick up a property that hasn't been done in a while, that you haven't seen in a while. Make your own modern incarnation of it that fits into the Now universe. Excuse me. And then get into creating some samples from that, because what you're going to end up having is you could build up your own voice. And everybody was squawking about how Marvel sucks and this, that, and the other, and it's horrible now and that and the other. And I totally agree to an extent that Marvel is in the dumpster right now, and I do support that theory, because I don't think that comics are in a good state right now. I just don't. And a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's quite all right. I'm completely okay with that. However, what I am looking at is, if you look at the state of the books themselves that are out there right now, in comparison to what's not out there, if you want to complain about it, do something about it. Put your voice in a book. Put your voice in a project. Put in the time, the investment, and jump on and get on that bandwagon, because if you don't, someone else is. So I'm pacing out the brick wall right now, if that's what you're wondering what I'm doing, because I'm hesitating. I am pacing out the brick wall and putting in the elements from where we need them to go for the next section. So, but as I was saying, though, definitely get on board. And if you're not doing a comic, um, if you see something that you want to jump in and put a voice on, do it. I challenge you to. We need more creative people out there doing that and questioning the status quo of what's going on right now as creators as well as fans. Nobody challenges this stuff. That's why they do it. And it's not that, Disney or Marvel's trying to be weird about it and, whatever. It's the fact that they're experimenting. They're lost right now and they're experimenting and trying to get that voice. And I've said for a long time, ever since the first Iron Man movie came out back in '08, there's been a huge jump there. And I said, if you want to know where Marvel's going, because Disney owns it now, if you want to know where Marvel's going, you follow those films. I've said that all along since day one. And that's a lot of where they're doing it right now, because they're trying stuff out in the comics and moving it forward as a testing ground. And then they're doing original incarnations over the top of the best from the comics in the movies. So they're using the best of the source material to get where they're going, but they're also contradicting themselves, because then they put out the new Marvel Now books and change things up so drastically that it's not necessarily a culture shock as much as it is a lost readership. There's no continuity or grip to hang on to for readers like me to stay in, where they're trying to get kids to come on for the younger generation. I mean, originally Marvel was all about Stan Lee and the other writers and creators and whatnot creating comics for themselves. They were 30-year-old guys that wanted to read comics and could afford to collect them. Where now everybody's trying to merchandise it in the Disney traditional style, to where they're trying to commercialize it to where it's not for adults as much as it is for kids. This is the modern wave of Disney. And I think they're making a huge mistake. And yes, I am countering it right here and right now. I think they're making a huge, massive marketing mistake by cutting out the adults and trying to lean us into the movies where more money can be made, instead of keeping us out of the comic books, where we need to be back involved in those properties. Because it's our generation that made the fandom that's following that right now. I mean, a lot of people say that, well, the kids of the 90s screwed comic books up with all their superhero stuff. No, the creators did that. They diversified too much and too quick, and they ended up making a market for themselves, and then they got into a multiprocity type of sales funnel, as it was, and it was a void. It was a vortex of just spiraling money at the time. And there was a boom with the comic books coming out, and everything was revitalized with the cartoon series and all that, and the video game age and all that, coming up to the modern, high-end graphic stuff that we start having around that time, compared to what we have now, which is almost the virtual reality type. That's what kids grew up with, and that's what we knew. And, I was a teen in the 90s. I saw that change, and I was just like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it in comics or not, because of the transition coming so fast that it wiped out most of the commercial market before I ever got into it, to where I could make decent money with it. And so many people tell me that all the time. So we've got to change the market and get it back to where it's money bound again, rather than getting it, everybody wants the heyday back, but what they don't understand is it was a real estate bubble in comics, because instead of having so many houses on the market and so much money thrown into it with new construction, we ended up getting the bad result from so many comics being produced in the same manner. So when it busted because it got too big too quick, that's what we ended up with. And a lot of people don't understand that. So, if you want to know what happened to the 90s bubble, 20 different versions of an X-Men cover is what happened to the 90s. I'm not knocking it, because the creativity was a different level. Even if you like Image or you don't, it still opened a lot of doors for a lot of stuff that wasn't there beforehand. That's what I like about the 90s Image style stuff. So, there's a lot of open doors for a lot of new artists that weren't there, and now these guys are prime, and they're coming back to build out a lot of these books because of the fact that nobody else is there anymore. The old guard's gone because they don't understand the continuity anymore, and then you have the other guys coming off, looking for work, getting back into comics because they've been out from the '90s bubble bust. You got to hang on to it, and you either got a winner like Todd McFarlane, where he grounded himself and invested his money into a business growth, or you've got the other stuff where you got people doing greeting cards and crap. You got to think about that, and you got to plan as your career goes forward in comics. You got to think about that, but a lot of people don't, man. I mean, that's something I talk about with people all the time is what's your growth plan for your books? And they're like, well, I don't have one. I want to start a comic, but I just want to do the comic and I want to make it, I want it to make me famous. Well, you're going to get a huge wake-up call that way because it's not like that anymore. So, I mean, you got to have a blockbuster comic book to make it happen because there's so many voices, especially with the internet age. So, but, and don't get me wrong, I'm not ranting here at all. I'm not angry about it or anything weird like that. That's not it. I'm not that excessive with it. It's just conversation for this card. But yeah, I mean, if you're into comics, definitely get your butt in gear and make a comic book and get out there and get noticed by Marvel or DC. That's the way to get picked up. I'm going to put these drop shadows right here in the creases of his eyes just to make them separate from the hair a little bit. And I'm going to leave that hair light, and I'm just going to shadow the bottom side of it. Just to pop it up a little bit. You guys didn't expect to get a conversation out of it tonight, did you? At least a lecture on it, more or less, because it's a one-sided conversation at that. But, yep, there it went. That's my 2 cents. And if you're a Facebook friend of mine, which I know all of you are because that's exactly where you're seeing this from right now, it cracks me up because we did that app thing for, what famous comic book artist are you most like? I got Alan Moore. If you guys don't know, I got Alan Moore. And it cracks me up because the irony of that is just hilarious. I'm very supportive of the industry. I'm very creative in the industry. But I do walk to the beat of my own drum, and a lot of people don't like that rhythm, but that's okay. It is what it is, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or hide it. That's who I am and what I'm about. I do the same thing in my marketing. It's very, very strict stuff. A lot of people are like, you don't do this, don't do that. And I'm just like, well, I'm doing my thing. I'm going to teach people. I'm going to share people, stuff. I'm going to show what's going on. I'm going to show how to do it and how to do it right so that they can get to the top of these places and get their art out there and get their stuff done. And that's what I'm about. So all right. So I think we're going to call that one, well, as soon as I go in here and shade this hand, so that it comes up as a full form other than just a sketch line. We've about got him here. I just want to add a little shading to that to make it pop up a little bit. And shadow that side of the knuckle a little bit. just to show that edge. Okay. Okay. I think we got it shaded up all right. For now, anyway. Go off this card just a little. Cool. I think we're going to call it done there. Excuse me. Get a little drink here. Now, I'm going to finish up with this. What do you guys think? I've got that one done, and we're doing Sabertooth tomorrow. So, what do you guys think about the current state of things? Let me know what's going on with it, and touch base with me on the comments, and post to me, message me, and we'll talk about it. Whatever. I'm definitely down with that and cool with it. Also, shoot me a couple of ideas, like Matt was talking about yesterday. Give me a couple of ideas of what you guys want to see, and we'll get into that a little more too, and I'll add them to the list, and we'll keep these things pumping out. For now, though, I'm going to call it, because this is a little bit over a 30-minute run, about 32 minutes in here. I'm going to say thank you guys for hanging out with me so late in the evening, and we'll be back at the regular times between 3:30 and 4:30 tomorrow, depending on the exact time of whenever I finish up my page in the morning. But I will check you guys out tomorrow. Thanks for hanging. Later.